Tonight, you wander into a world where the Middle Ages smelled, well, surprisingly useful, thanks to the astonishing number of things people did with pee. You begin tonight's quiet wander not with a grand trumpet blast or a dramatic battle, but with something far humbler, the faint, unmistakable tang of medieval life drifting on the cool night air. It's not unpleasant exactly, just historically assertive. The kind of smell that whispers. People here really made the most out of whatever their bodies offered. And yes, by the end of this journey, you'll know far more about pee than you ever thought necessary. A soft torchlight flickers along the village wall as you step into a narrow street. The stones beneath your feet are worn, rounded, and slightly damp. You don't ask why. You already know the answer, and knowing is enough. The village exhales around you. Wood smoke, wool, bread, and the faintest hint of multitasking fluid. Before we go deeper, a quiet, cheeky warning. You probably won't make it through this day. The Middle Ages had a way of exhausting even the most enthusiastic time travelers. Still, before your eyelids get too heavy, go ahead and gently like this video if you're enjoying the soft stroll. And maybe subscribe so you can wander other strange corners of history with me. And if you feel comfortable, whisper down in the comments. Where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? I always love knowing where in the world you're drifting off to sleep. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. You move deeper into the early dawn of a medieval town. The sky still soaked in blue-gray. Chickens mutter half-awake gossip. A baker yawns into a rising cloud of flour. And from a nearby open doorway, you hear someone pouring something into a wooden bucket with the kind of casual confidence that says, "Yes, this is my morning routine. No, I'm not embarrassed, because you are walking straight into a world where pee isn't just waste. It's currency. It's cleaning product. It's industrial solvent. It's, well, a shockingly versatile part of daily life." You pause near a corner where an elderly woman empties a chamber pot into a collection vat labeled, handwritten in wobbly charcoal, "For the fuller." She notices you looking and shrugs as if to say, "Everybody's got to make a living." This is your first major historical fact of the night. Medieval fullers used stale urine to clean and whiten wool, stamping cloth with their feet for hours in tubs of the stuff. An ancient, fragrant spin cycle. You watch as a young apprentice trudges by carrying 2 sloshing buckets, his shoes doing their best impression of resignation. His expression is serene, almost meditative, proof that humans truly can adapt to anything. As you walk on, you notice a sign painted with a crude drawing of 2 legs, a length of cloth, and what might be either a sunburst or a puddle. You decide not to think too hard about it. After all, medieval symbolism is interpretive. Beyond the foolery, a man with a beard thick enough to hide small forest creatures sits on a stool, mending fishing nets. He glances up and mutters something about how people used to collect urine in public pots for tax purposes. This, surprisingly, is your obscure cultural tidbit. Some towns actually taxed urine collection because it was so economically important. You walk past him slowly, because moving too quickly in this town feels like breaking the gentle contract of early morning. Everything here breathes a bit more slowly, especially the workers who know what kind of chores await them. A cat trots across your path, tail up, stopping just long enough to sniff one of the fuller's buckets before wisely reconsidering its life choices. A few streets later, you reach a long wooden trough where several people are rinsing woven baskets. A woman in a blue apron explains that urine can help remove certain stains and even soften leather. She speaks with the calm authority of someone who has explained this topic too many times to too many surprised visitors. Then she lowers her voice and says, almost conspiratorially, Historians still debate whether we preferred human urine or whether animal urine was better for some jobs. You nod thoughtfully, as one does. As you step away, you can't help thinking, modern people have no idea how hard they have it. They complain about detergent prices, but at least they don't need a neighborhood pee collection program. You follow a winding stone path toward the river, noticing the way morning light bends through the mist. A soft breeze grazes your face, carrying with it the layered stories of this place. Every footstep, every bucket, every small act of daily survival. And with that, the first part of your journey comes to a gentle close. Not with fanfare, not with drama, but with the simple understanding that medieval life was a masterpiece of making do. You continue walking, slow as drifting fog, letting the town stretch awake around you. The sun edges a little higher now, though it still hides shyly behind thin clouds. The medieval town is fully awake, or as awake as a place can be when the majority of jobs involve either hauling, stirring, scraping, or pretending not to smell something. You step into the market square, where merchants are already arranging their goods. Fruits, wool, milk, and in one corner, because medieval marketing is nothing if not bold, someone has set up a stall offering good strong water. You don't ask. You don't need to. What you do notice, though, is a tanner's workshop just beyond the stalls. Wide wooden beams, thick hides hanging like sleepy flags, and a series of vats, each emitting a different level of olfactory enthusiasm. The tanner waves you over with a grin that suggests he's long past the stage of caring what he smells like. He dips his hand into a vat and explains, casually, conversationally, like he's discussing bread recipes, that urine was used to help remove hair from hides during leather making. Another major historical fact for you tonight. You nod politely, even though your brain briefly whispers, of course they did. As you wander deeper into the workshop, you feel the warmth of fermenting mixtures rising from the vats. It's oddly comforting the way bread ovens are comforting. If bread ovens had, well, different priorities. A stray dog lounges near the doorway, lifting his head only to determine whether your presence requires effort. It does not. He sleeps again. You notice a young boy stirring one of the vats with a long wooden pole. He hums as he works, a little melody with no urgency at all. When he catches your curious stare, he shrugs like a philosopher of bodily fluids and says, everything's useful if you're poor enough. You're not sure if it's wisdom or sarcasm or both. Across the courtyard, two women are scrubbing linens with brisk, practiced motions. One tells you that stale urine helps whiten fabric like a medieval bleach. The other adds that fresh urine is less good, which is probably the understatement of the century. You stroll along a row of houses where wooden ladders lean against walls, and bunches of herbs hang drying from windows. Lavender, rosemary, mint, nature's attempt to politely cover up the background notes of daily life. It helps, somewhat. A man with an impressive mustache gestures toward a small clay pot and says he uses urine to soak wool threads before dyeing them, claiming it makes colors more vibrant. Whether he's correct or simply hopeful is unclear. Perhaps this is your sentence of scholarly uncertainty. Historians still debate whether urine truly improved the dyeing process or whether medieval dyers simply assumed anything pungent must also be effective. You continue walking through the alleys, feeling the pace of the town settling into your body. Slow, rhythmic, simple. Everywhere you turn, you find another corner of life shaped quietly by the same strange resource. Leather, cloth, cleaning, dye, medicine even, a medieval multi-tool. Along the edge of the square, you pass a group of apprentices whispering about a neighbor who supposedly saved his urine for weeks to sell at a higher price. You appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit. This is your obscure cultural tidbit for the section. Some medieval households actually stored urine in their attics to age it properly before selling it to tradesmen. You picture someone carefully rotating their inventory like a fine wine cellar and try not to laugh. A soft smile escapes anyway. As the day warms, a gentle breeze stirs dust across flagstones. You pause at a fountain, one of the few places where the air feels brighter and cleaner. Children run circles around it, chasing each other with sticks, shouting reminders about imaginary dragons, completely unbothered by the fact that this same water is used for everything from cooking to cooling to washing away yesterday's realities. A woman balances a large bucket on her hip, humming a lullaby that reminds you of slow rain against parchment. She nods at you as she passes, footsteps easy and unhurried. Remember the street you walked past earlier? It's back. This time you see it from a higher angle, and the layout of the town feels familiar, almost cozy. Even the smells seem less surprising now. Your nose has politely adapted, deciding to be a team player. The sun drifts higher, but your pace stays soft, dreamlike, and as you step into the shade of an overhanging roof, you realize how effortlessly medieval life blends necessity, creativity, and a healthy disregard for modern squeamishness. You take one more deep breath of the town's living history, letting it settle into your mind like a story you've always known. The later morning settles over the town like a warm wool blanket, slightly scratchy, slightly comforting, and definitely in need of a wash. You walk toward the outskirts, where open fields stretch beyond wooden fences, and the air thins into something gentler, less industrially fragrant. A shepherd leans against a post, watching his flock nibble grass with the concentration of tiny, wool-covered scholars. He gives you a nod that implies he knows exactly what you've been learning about this town's, let's say, liquid economy. He doesn't judge. No one here does. They simply live as though nature's full palette, every color, every scent were perfectly ordinary. As you walk, the shepherd mentions, almost casually, that farmers sometimes used urine to help tan sheep hides before selling them. You murmur politely, continuing the medieval tradition of pretending this is the most natural sentence you've ever heard. But then he adds something more intriguing. We also use it to tell if wool's been tampered with, he says. That's tonight's obscure tidbit. Urine could help reveal tricks dishonest sellers used to weigh wool down artificially. You watch his sheep wander across the field, their hooves tapping the ground like soft drumbeats. A light wind shivers through the grass. In this peaceful setting, the morning's tasks feel less strange, almost practical even. Nature wastes nothing. People followed suit. A small cottage sits nearby, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. You wander toward it, drawn by the smell of something cooking, herbs, broth, maybe a hint of yesterday's bread. A woman stands outside, scrubbing a pot in a wooden basin. She explains that stale urine can help clean stubborn soot from cookware. You are now fully convinced that medieval life was a masterclass in resourcefulness, and perhaps in ignoring your own nose. She laughs softly and confesses that sometimes she adds rosemary to the pot afterward, so it smells more like dinner and less like not dinner. Her humor is subtle but kind, like everything else here. Further up the path, you find a small workshop where a man repairs boots. Leather pieces lie strewn across a table like a puzzle he's solved 1,000 times. He waves you in, then casually mentions that urine-soaked hides are easier to scrape clean. A moment later, he leans closer and says, though historians still debate whether this method was universal or just something my grandfather insisted was correct. The scholarly uncertainty floats between you like a shared secret. Behind him, boots dry on pegs. Some look soft and supple. Others resemble something you'd wear into battle against weather, animals, or Mondays. You continue walking until you reach a small stream that glitters in the sunlight. This is the water many villagers rely on to rinse what earlier processes have prepared. You watch as a couple of apprentices dunk fabric into the water, shaking it gently, as though soothing a restless sleeper. Their hands move with steady patience. No rush, no frustration, just the calm understanding that life's tasks are cyclical and slow. You dip your fingers into the cool water. It runs clear, soothing, refreshing, almost like it's apologizing for everything you've witnessed so far. As you stand by the bank, a goose waddles past with the confidence of someone who owns property. Medieval animals always seem to have unions you're not qualified to join. The breeze shifts, carrying the sound of distant laughter from town. Someone tells a joke you can't quite hear, but you catch the gentle rhythm of joy. People here know how to find humor, even in chores that would send modern sensibilities into full retreat. You walk back toward the village, the sunlight glinting across rooftops. There is something strangely cozy about all of it. Not the smells, no, never the smells, but the spirit, this unhurried acceptance of life as it is. And as you step into the shade of a narrow alley, the town folds around you like a living story, ready to reveal more. The afternoon settles in soft and golden, as though the sun itself has decided to lean back and take a slow breath. Your footsteps echo lightly in a courtyard where a few craftsmen gather during their midday break. A potter sits cross-legged on the ground, shaping wet clay with practiced hands. He glances up and says he's heard the fullers nearby offer discounts if you bring your own bucket. His tone suggests he isn't sure whether this is a bargain or a trap. You give him a polite smile, the medieval version of, "I hope that works out for you." Nearby, a young woman stirs a vat of dye. The liquid inside swirls into deep blues and purples, mesmerizing in its fluid dance. She explains, smoothly, casually, that they sometimes pre-soak yarn in urine before dyeing because it helps the color cling more deeply. Another major historical fact tucked gently into the day. She lifts a strand of wool, dripping color back into the vat, and says with a smirk, "Beauty takes effort, you know, and occasionally sacrifice." You appreciate the understatement. You stroll past a row of drying racks where cloth hangs like flags of forgotten kingdoms. Some are pale, some vividly dyed, and a few carry the faintly suspicious glimmer of having recently endured a process not discussed in polite company. In the shade, an elderly man sharpens tools with slow, rhythmic strokes. "People complain about the smell," he mutters, not looking up, "but it's the smell of work, of survival." Then he adds, far more softly, "Besides, after a few decades you stop noticing. You're not sure if that's comforting or deeply alarming." A chicken hops onto a barrel beside him, as if agreeing. As you continue walking, a cluster of children runs past you, laughing as they chase each other with sticks. One shouts something about pretending to be a fuller. You decide not to ask for details. Some things are better left unexamined. You wander toward a small brewery, where barley dries in the sun and the air smells like warm grain and hope. The brewer leans on the doorway, sipping something foamy. He tells you that sometimes urine was used to test the fermentation of ale, though whether this was intentional science or accidental curiosity remains unclear. And so you get your sentence of scholarly uncertainty for this section. Historians still debate whether urine testing in brewing was an actual technique or merely a misunderstood anecdote passed down through centuries. Inside, barrels line the walls, each bearing chalk marks like secret codes. You touch one gently. The wood feels cool and sturdy, like it remembers every batch ever brewed. The brewer lifts his drink and says, "Don't worry, we don't do that now." You believe him, mostly. Outside again, the sunlight stretches across the courtyard, illuminating a stone walkway leading back toward the center of town. Remember the fountain you passed earlier? You hear it now before you see it. The soft rush of water, the playful chatter of children, the echo of life unfolding in tiny, gentle motions. When you reach it, you find a woman rinsing vegetables. She smiles and gestures for you to taste one. It's crisp, earthy, refreshing proof that even in a place where bodily fluids have surprisingly robust resumes, nature still offers simple, honest gifts. She sets the vegetables aside and tells you that households used to keep special clay pots just for storing urine. Some pots were decorated, she says, painted, personalized. That's your obscure tidbit for this section. You picture someone proudly displaying their artisanal, handcrafted storage pot. Humanity is endlessly creative. As you wander away, the afternoon sun dips behind a cloud, bathing the town in soft, silvered light. A breeze stirs, carrying with it the layered sense of everyday medieval life. Some pleasant, some questionable, all entirely real. The streets grow quieter as the town moves into the gentle lull of late day. And you walk on, unhurried, letting the medieval rhythm lead you deeper. You stand at the doorway of the Phalonica, the medieval laundromat that depends entirely on the generosity of public urinals. The morning light slants across the threshold, catching flecks of steam rising from enormous tubs that look far too optimistic about their purpose. A man waves you inside with the unearned enthusiasm of someone who has already accepted the smell as a personality trait. You step in. You immediately regret stepping in. Your boots make a soft, unmistakable squelch that tells you everything you need to know about the floor. But you breathe anyway because you're polite and because holding your breath this long would make you pass out. You follow the fuller, each step releasing a new aromatic secret into the world. Soft sunlight glows across the vats, turning the surface of the liquid into a warm amber. Yes, amber is technically correct. You remind yourself of this as you politely nod while the fuller explains the process, as if he's introducing you to the fine art of winemaking instead of the fine art of pea-stepping. He says that wealthy households deliver jars of urine every few days, labeled politely with the donor's name. He tells you there's a best time of day for collecting it, and you decide not to ask more. There is only so much intimacy you want with medieval dawn routines. He gestures proudly to a row of workers stepping rhythmically in the vats, knees lifting and lowering like they're performing a soft, sloshy folk dance. You watch one of them, his expression completely neutral. Either he has transcended earthly suffering, or he checked out emotionally months ago. You can't tell which. The fuller says this treading helps whiten cloth thanks to ammonia. That's the historical fact, by the way. The Middle Ages really did this. You glance at him with the face of someone pretending to be impressed while slowly dissociating. You take a moment to observe the room. Ropes of drying wool, tubs of soaking tunics, and shelves holding clay jars with tidy handwritten notes like "strong batch" and "do not mix." You appreciate the organizational effort. If color-coded planners existed, this man would have used them. Outside, a donkey brays. You suspect even he knows what's happening inside this building and would like to file a complaint. The fuller pats your shoulder reassuringly and tells you that, in some older periods, Rome even taxed urine because it was so useful. You wonder if there's a point in human history when someone could have stood up and said, "Maybe we should try something else." But historians still debate whether that moment ever existed, or whether society just collectively shrugged and walked into another century of liquids best not discussed. You wander deeper between vats until you notice something odd. A tiny charm hung above one of the tubs. A little figure carved from bone, smiling in a way that feels both comforting and vaguely threatening. The fuller whispers that it's a superstition, keeps the batch from spoiling. You admire the confidence of this statement, considering that nothing in these vats could spoil further. You stand near a window where sunlight breaks through in warm, gentle beams. The light hits floating droplets of steam, turning the room into a glowing golden haze. If you squint, you can almost pretend it's romantic. People centuries from now might even call this atmosphere rustic. They will be wrong, of course, but that's what nostalgia does. The fuller asks if you want to try stepping into a vat yourself. You decline so quickly that you may have invented a new medieval gesture. He shrugs, and you swear you hear the vat sigh with relief. After a few moments, you find yourself adjusting to the slow rhythm of the workshop. Workers move like drifting boats, steady, patient, resigned. You feel a soft heaviness settle in your limbs, the kind that tells you it's safe to relax. You lean against the warm stone wall and listen. The splash of feet, the rustling of cloth, the distant clop of hooves, a spoon stirring somewhere. The world here moves without hurry, without apology, and without deodorant. Before leaving, you glance once more at the vats, their surfaces shimmering under the midday light. Something about them feels ancient, necessary, oddly peaceful. You step outside, grateful for fresh air, but also carrying a quiet respect for the people who lived entire lives among these tubs. People who worked, joked, sang, slept, woke up, and willingly stepped into their jobs every day. Literally. You walk down the street again, the same one from earlier, though you notice its smell feels subtler now. Perhaps you've adapted. Perhaps you've spiritually ascended. Hard to tell. Either way, you continue on, deeper into the medieval city where more pea-powered marvels await you. You drift into a quieter lane now, its stones warm beneath your feet, its alleys filled with a softer morning hush. Laundry flaps overhead like medieval flags of domestic achievement. Somewhere, a baker hums while kneading dough that you sincerely hope involves no surprise ingredients. You pause near a barrel whose contents slosh suspiciously when someone walks by. You avoid making eye contact with it. You wander toward a small workshop tucked between two leaning wooden houses. The sign above the door shows a crude drawing of a leather shoe, and beneath it, a bucket drawn with the artistic skill of someone who has seen a bucket once. Before you enter, a wave of warm air drifts out, mixed with something faintly tangy, faintly organic, faintly, oh no. Welcome to medieval leather tanning. You step inside. The room is lined with hides stretched across frames, each one drying in the dim light like a troop of sleepy ghosts. A tanner spots you immediately. He has the posture of a man who has given up on explaining anything to anyone ever again. He waves you closer and lifts a hide with a kind of grim pride. He tells you, in a tone that suggests he has repeated this explanation 7,000 times, that urine softens leather and helps remove hair during processing. You nod sagely, as if this is a reasonable thing for a person to say out loud before breakfast. He adds that some tanners prefer aged urine because it works better. That's the obscure tidbit, by the way. You try not to think too hard about the scientific implications. A worker across the room dips a hide into a bucket using a wooden paddle. He moves with slow, deliberate motions, almost meditative. You find yourself lulled by the gentle sloshing sound, an oddly calming rhythm if you ignore absolutely everything about its source. You watch leather darken, soften, and transform in his hands. It's strangely beautiful in that I'm appreciating this from a safe emotional distance sort of way. The tanner mentions that scholars aren't entirely sure how early certain tanning techniques developed, and you appreciate that even academic uncertainty manages to feel peaceful here, like a shrug shared across centuries. He walks you around the workshop, pointing out vats, scraping tools, and a pair of boots drying by the fire. You wonder, not for the first time, how something touched by all this can end up smelling perfectly normal by the time it gets to a market stall. Perhaps there is ancient magic involved. Perhaps the boots are lying. You linger near the doorway where fresh air mingles with the workshop's warmth. The clamor of the street feels distant, softened by the thick wood walls. You watch dust drift lazily through sunbeams, turning the room golden. Everything slows. Everything settles. Even the tanner moves gently now, his motions practiced, steady, almost tender. As you step back outside, you notice a child skipping past you carrying a small clay pot like it's perfectly normal. And maybe it is here. Everyone participates in this great, unspoken recycling program. Peasants, merchants, nobles, monks. You walk behind the child for a moment, listening to her humming, watching her shadow dance across uneven stones. Life here moves simply, steadily, and with a surprising amount of buckets. You head toward the market square again, letting the sun warm your face as familiar sounds rise around you. The ring of a blacksmith's hammer, the soft wheeze of a cartwheel, the chatter of vendors selling herbs, cheese, and occasionally things you hope are herbs and cheese. As you walk, a gentle fatigue drapes itself over your shoulders like a borrowed cloak. The city's slow rhythm starts weaving into your breath, your steps, your thoughts. You take one last glance back at the tanner's shop. The door is half open, sunlight cutting across the floor in a soft, glowing stripe. Inside, the workers continue moving with their quiet, steady determination. You feel a small tug of admiration. They are keepers of a craft older than kingdoms, older than cities, older than most of the stories people bother to write down. And so you keep walking deeper into the heart of this pea-powered medieval world, where every street holds another secret, another task, another faintly alarming bucket waiting for you. You wander toward the edge of the market square, where stalls thin out and the noise softens into a gentle, blurry hum. Here, the city's heartbeat slows, and you can feel it. The shift from public bustle to private crafts, from loud bargaining to small, purposeful work. A woman sits on a low stool outside her cottage, stirring something in a clay pot with a focus usually reserved for secret family recipes. You step closer, hoping it's soup. It is not soup. She glances up and gives you a warm, neighborly smile. The kind that says, "Yes, I know exactly what you're about to smell. And no, I'm not sorry." She invites you over with a little tilt of her chin, and you join her, settling beside the pot like you're about to share a meal. Instead, she lifts her spoon and proudly announces that she is making dye. Yellow dye specifically, using urine. Fresh. No. Fermented? Obviously. You brace yourself. She explains that certain plants release stronger pigments when mixed with ammonia, and urine, nature's uncelebrated multi-tool, provides exactly that. You nod like a seasoned traveler, though internally you feel like someone accidentally enrolled you in an advanced chemistry course taught entirely by smell. A few drops slip from her spoon back into the pot with a plop far too confident for your comfort. The color swirling inside is surprisingly vibrant, sunny, luminous, almost cheerful. A small, traitorous part of you likes it. Nearby, a bundle of wool hangs drying, tinted a soft golden hue that glows in the morning light like pale honey. She encourages you to touch it, so you do, cautiously, expecting some sort of residue. But it's just wool, warm, clean, pleasant. You raise your brows. She smirks, as if to say, "See? Not everything in life is as bad as the first 5 seconds of smelling it." She dips another skein into the pot, stirring gently. The motion is hypnotic, the swirl slow enough to make your eyelids feel slightly heavier. The steam drifts upward in soft curls. You watch it thicken, rise, and dissolve into the sunlight. Even here, surrounded by unglamorous ingredients, there is something transcendent in the way craftspeople move. Steady, patient, deeply connected to the ordinary magic of turning raw materials into something beautiful. She mentions that some dyers swear different regions make better dye because the quality of urine varies by diet. You consider this for a moment, imagining medieval Yelp reviews for regional pee. An amusing thought. She also mentions that historians still debate how widely these dyeing methods spread in early centuries. You nod, knowing scholarly uncertainty now feels almost cozy, like a familiar blanket. A cat wanders by and rubs against your ankle, then sniffs the pot and reconsiders its life choices in real time. You and the cat share a moment of silent understanding. The woman laughs gently and tells you her grandmother used to hang pots on high shelves so pets wouldn't meddle with the ingredients. That's the obscurity tidbit, if you're counting. Apparently medieval pets had a long history of trying to sabotage artisanal chemistry. You rise, giving her a small thank you, and she waves you off cheerfully, returning to her stirring with the serenity of someone who knows her craft matters, even if it makes visitors walk away blinking in disbelief. You drift back onto the street, feeling the sunlight settle comfortably across your shoulders. You pass a baker pulling warm bread from an oven, the smell soft and sweet. For a moment you stand between two scents, one heavenly, one deeply character-building, and you wonder if balance has finally been restored to the universe. The day continues, slow and mellow, the streets curving and winding like they've forgotten to be in a hurry. You notice again the stones beneath your feet, the same stones from earlier, familiar and sure, welcoming you deeper into this city where the strange and the practical coexist without apology. You breathe deeper, your steps steady, your mind softened by the rhythm of a world that knows exactly who it is. You keep walking. You find yourself drifting toward the river, the gentle artery of the city. Its water glimmers, shimmering with the calm confidence of something that has seen centuries come and go and has absolutely no intention of changing for anyone. A few small boats rest against the bank, bobbing gently. A fisherman dozes beside his nets, hat tilted, completely unbothered by the world. You envy his ability to nap upright. You walk along the path until you spot a small group gathered near the water's edge. They're washing linen, soft whites, muted grays, and the occasional tunic that has clearly lived through things. As you approach, you prepare yourself for buckets or vats or some other medieval plot twist, but instead you find a scene surprisingly peaceful. The women are rinsing fabrics that were, some hours ago, soaking in ammonia-rich mixtures back in town. One woman lifts a sheet, letting the river run through it as she whistles a tune so gentle it seems to float on the air. You stand nearby, hands clasped behind your back, taking in the surprisingly idyllic moment. The cloth ripples like liquid silver. The workers move with a slow precision, folding and refolding, dipping and lifting, as if participating in a ritual older than the stones beneath your feet. You ask softly why they rinse here and not in the city. One of them explains that river water carries burdens away, and you decide that's one of the most poetic ways to describe laundry you've ever heard. She adds that it keeps the city cleaner and that there are rules about what can and can't be emptied into the river. You appreciate the early environmental consciousness, though you make a mental note never to swim downstream. A younger woman pauses to rest, leaning on her knee. She tells you an odd tidbit. Some towns used urine-soaked cloth strips as part of medieval wound cleaning. You immediately decide not to picture it. She assures you it worked somehow, but historians still debate exactly which remedies were truly effective and which were just medieval optimism in action. You smile politely, choosing peace over inquiry. You sit on a flat stone and watch the linen dance in the flowing water. Sunlight glints off droplets that roll down folds of fabric like tiny crystals. The air is cool here, a soft contrast to the warmth of the city. The river hums with a low, gentle sound, the kind that makes your shoulders relax without permission. A little boy runs past, splashing as he goes. He's carrying a wooden ladle and laughing like he has discovered the secret to eternal joy. You wonder if the secret is simply having no idea what adults use half this water for. He waves at you and continues his quest to get as wet as possible. The workers begin hanging the rinsed linen across long wooden frames. The fabric billows in the wind like slow-moving clouds. You stare at them, letting the rhythm lull your mind into a soft, drifting calm. You feel the weight of the day settling into your muscles, turning every breath deeper, slower. A woman next to you chuckles and says that during especially busy seasons, people used to schedule pea collection days like community events. Everyone participating, chatting, sharing news while holding ceramic pots with questionable pride. You imagine this for a moment. A medieval block party with buckets. Humanity is nothing if not resourceful. The river laps against the bank, soft and steady. Someone starts humming. Someone else joins. It is not a song you recognize, but you feel its warmth anyway, curling gently around your thoughts like steam from a warm mug. You close your eyes for a moment. The world narrows to sound. Water, humming, fabric brushing wood. The distant call of a water bird. Your breathing falls into the same rhythm, slow and unhurried. When you open your eyes, the linens are full and fluttering. The river calm and golden in the afternoon sun. You rise, stretching quietly, feeling softer now, lighter, as though some invisible weight has lifted from your shoulders. You follow the path back toward the heart of the city, your steps unhurried, the river's song echoing faintly behind you. More streets await, more crafts, more odd, brilliant uses for the world's most underestimated liquid. And you walk on. You leave the riverbank with the gentle confidence of someone who has survived several medieval industries and is now practically fluent in peer-related economics. The path curves back toward the city's inner lanes, where the noise softens into a murmured tapestry of daily life. Children chatter, chickens complain about absolutely nothing, and a pot clanks rhythmically somewhere as if practicing for its future role in a percussion band. You wander down a narrow alley where the houses lean inward like old friends gossiping over your head. Wooden beams press close, carrying the scent of centuries, warm dust, smoke, bread, and yes, the faint tang of ammonia drifting from somewhere nearby. At this point, you're not even surprised. Your nose has evolved. Congratulations. You follow the smell out of curiosity and find a small workshop tucked behind a cluster of crates. A modest sign hangs above the door, Scribes and Scrapers. You step inside and discover the world of medieval parchment making, which is, unsurprisingly, another place where pea makes a star appearance. A parchment maker greets you with the tired enthusiasm of a man who hasn't seen a clean-smelling day in years. He shows you a stretched hide, taut as a drum, pinned into a wooden frame. The surface is pale, smooth, and unexpectedly graceful. He hands you a scraper and invites you closer. You politely decline because after the tanning shop you have learned your boundaries. He explains, casually as if talking about the weather, That parchment is sometimes soaked in urine to help loosen hair and soften the hide before scraping. You nod with the face of someone pretending this is normal. He gestures to a bucket in the corner. You avoid looking directly at it in case it looks back. He runs a scraper along the hide, producing a soft, rhythmic sound like a chalkboard being gently persuaded to cooperate. You find it surprisingly soothing, which feels like personal character growth. Or maybe you're just tired. A young apprentice sits nearby, sanding a smaller sheet of parchment with almost meditative patience. He smiles shyly and tells you an obscure tidbit, that some scribes believed writing on parchment made from certain animals improved the clarity of their thoughts. You suppose everyone needs something to blame for writer's block. You linger near a table where finished sheets rest in a neat stack. Their texture is cool and smooth beneath your fingertips. You imagine monks copying sacred texts by candlelight, letters glowing warmly as ink settles into the parchment's fibers. The maker beside you murmurs that historians still debate which regions perfected parchment first. You appreciate this uncertainty. It feels right at home, drifting through the workshop like another quiet layer of history. The maker points out a decorative scroll hanging on the wall. Its letters curl elegantly, each stroke made with deliberate, loving patience. He tells you it took a full week to complete, scribes working slowly to avoid mistakes. There was no backspace key, only perseverance and prayer. Outside, someone rings a bell, soft, distant. The sun begins its slow descent, bathing the workshop in warm amber light. Dust motes float lazily through the glow, turning the air into something soft and shimmering. Everything moves slower now. Even the scrape of the blade becomes gentler, almost sleepy. You thank the parchment maker. He waves you off with a smile that suggests he genuinely enjoyed the company. Or perhaps he's just relieved he didn't have to explain the contents of the bucket to someone less polite. You step back into the narrow lane. The air feels cooler, kinder. You walk deeper into the city, noticing how the stones remember your steps. You feel yourself sinking further into the rhythm of this world. Its peculiar logic, its quiet beauty, and its unwavering belief that every bodily function has a purpose. The sky begins to soften, and so do you. You walk on. You turn down another street, this one lined with wooden houses whose upper floors jut out like elbows claiming extra space. Lanterns hang from crooked beams, swaying gently as if whispering secrets to each other. The sunset paints the rooftops in shades of gold and rose, turning even the most mundane objects, buckets, ladders, the occasional goat, into works of accidental art. As you walk, a faint clinking sound draws your attention. You follow it to a small courtyard where several metalworkers are preparing their tools for the coming evening. The forge glows dimly in the background, warm embers pulsing like a quiet heartbeat. The heat wraps around you as you step inside, comforting and heavy. A metalworker greets you with a nod. His apron bears the marks of a day well spent. Soot, scratches, the occasional mysterious stain. He gestures for you to come closer, holding up a clay jug with a mischievous grin. You now know enough to brace yourself. He explains that urine, rich in salts and ammonia, is sometimes used in the quenching process for certain metals. You stare at him, waiting for the punchline that never arrives. He tilts the jug slightly, and you suddenly become very aware of the temperature of your soul leaving your body. He pours a small amount into a shallow basin and dips a heated tool into it. Steam rises, sharp, immediate, and unmistakably aromatic. The smell is something between a blacksmith's forge and a public alley on festival night. You fight the urge to politely ascend into the sky. But then something unexpected happens. The metal hisses, cools rapidly, and hardens into exactly the shape he intended. He lifts it proudly. "Perfect edge," he says. You reluctantly admire it. He hands you a cooled, clean piece of metal to feel. Its surface is smooth, its temperature soft beneath your palm. You marvel at how something forged through fire and quenched in other things can become so refined. This is the medieval mindset. Nothing wasted, everything useful, even if it makes visitors question their life choices. Another worker joins, hammering gently at a horseshoe with a rhythm that feels more like music than labor. You watch sparks dance upward in tiny golden arcs. One lands near your boot, fizzles softly, and disappears. You find yourself falling into the lull of the workshop, the slow, steady beat of metal, the warmth of the forge, the deep hum of voices murmuring about daily tasks. A young apprentice rushes in holding a parchment, one that looks suspiciously like it came from earlier. He unrolls it dramatically, revealing a sketch of a new tool design. The master nods approvingly. You smile at the quiet continuity of this world. Parchment softened by urine, now being used to design metal cooled by the same substance. You consider this the Middle Ages version of a closed-loop system. Efficiency at its weirdest. Someone mentions an odd fact. In some regions, blacksmiths believed using urine from red-haired men produced stronger metal. You try not to imagine the recruitment process for that. The worker assures you historians still debate whether this was superstition, science, or sheer boredom. The forge dims as the evening deepens. Workers clean their tools with slow, practiced motions. Shadows stretch across the courtyard, long and soft. A dog curls beside the wall, sighing into sleep. You feel a similar heaviness blooming in your own bones, the pleasant kind, like sinking into warm sand or settling under a thick blanket. A final spark flickers upward from the forge, drifting like a tiny star before disappearing into the dark. You step out into the cool night air. The sky has shifted into a deep blue, sprinkled with early stars. The city quiets around you, lanterns glowing, windows closing, distant laughter echoing softly. You take a slow breath. You walk forward again, deeper into the medieval night, where the world turns gentle and strange and beautifully human. You continue following the faint yellow chalk marks on the cobblestones, the ones the night-soaked apprentice left earlier as a sort of breadcrumb trail through the city's welter of smells, stories, and slightly judgmental cats. You didn't ask for a guided tour, of course, but medieval life has a habit of guiding you whether you want it to or not. A bit like a grandmother insisting you eat more even as you whisper, "I'm full truly." This street, though, has a different rhythm. It curves gently, a lazy river of stone, and the houses lean overhead like old friends comparing notes about who tripped over which barrel. You feel the quiet of the hour settling over you. It's not silence exactly, more a spaciousness. A small window cracks open above, and someone shakes out a bit of straw bedding, the dust drifting like sleepy stars. A very tired rooster mutters one confused erga before deciding dawn is not worth the effort just yet. You empathize. Dawn has a demanding reputation. As you turn the corner, your feet graze the memory of that earlier barrel of stale washwater. Funny how your senses store things even after you wish they wouldn't. But now there's a new scent, sharper. A whisper of pine-like acidity mixed with rye bread. You follow it as if some curious instinct has grown legs and is dragging you along. When you look down, you notice a small wooden marker jammed between stones. A carved symbol of a jug. Another one of those helpful medieval road signs that are helpful only if you already know what they mean. You pass a house where a man snores so loudly through the shutters you half expect his breath to push them open. The rhythm of it becomes a sort of lullaby, and you catch yourself swaying slightly. The city is a creature at night. Its heartbeat slower, but constant. Its breath warm and layered, like old bread dough left to rise under a cloth. Just ahead, you spot a lone baker hunched over his doorway, sprinkling something over his proving dough. He's muttering to himself in the half-language people use when very tired and slightly annoyed at the universe. As you watch, he pulls from a small clay cup a liquid suspiciously familiar. Yes, P. A dash of ammoniac magic to brighten the dough. Because humans have always been both wildly creative and slightly too comfortable with improvisation. Historically verified fact. Some medieval bakers used stale urine in cleaning or bleaching flour sacks to keep pests away. You can't help but admire the stubborn ingenuity. Part brilliance, part, okay, but why? Exactly? The baker glances up at you. You didn't see anything, he mumbles. People think all we do is bread, but there's science. His voice trails off, drifting into the night like a half-baked thesis statement. You give a very small nod. You don't judge. You're too sleepy for judgment anyway. You walk on, and the cobblestones feel warm beneath your feet. The city holds heat like a secret. You can hear distant drinking songs from a tavern. The kind where every note wobbles like someone balancing on a stool that's definitely seen better days. Someone shouts a joke about monks brewing beer that is lost in a gust of wind before it reaches you. Probably for the best. In a quieter alley, you find another curious scene. A woman rinsing wool with a mixture of water and, yes, more urine. Wool cleaning was practically fueled by the stuff. She's humming a gentle tune under her breath. A soft thread of melody tying her to the stillness around her. The wool floats in the tub like sleepy clouds settling in for the night. You feel a strange comfort watching her work, slow and steady, like long breathing. There's something meditative about tasks that repeat endlessly. Something you'd lose yourself in if life today involved fewer notifications. A cat rubs against your ankle, the same one you swear you saw earlier on a rooftop. Cats in this city clearly teleport. It looks up at you the way cats do when they want something but refuse to admit it. Then it trots off, tail raised, leading you onward as if it's been assigned as your fuzzy, mildly judgmental tour guide. You follow because, well, you have no better plan. As you walk, you pass a little shrine where someone left a bunch of wilted herbs and a small bottle. Naturally, your curiosity betrays you again, and you sniff. It's vinegar mixed with aged urine, a potion believed to ward off bad luck and evil spirits. Historians still debate whether it actually worked or if medieval spirits simply had better boundaries. The wind picks up and nudges you like a friend, reminding you to keep moving. You're drifting, just a little lulled by the rhythm of the city's breathing. The cat looks back once, as if to confirm you're still functional. You are. Mostly. A memory rises. The street you walked earlier with those huge vats of fermenting cloth. The air has a similar tang now, as if the whole city shares its aromas the way neighbors share gossip. Only here, the gossip is mostly about who left their chamber pot outside too long. You hear a distant church bell tolling the hour. A slow, weary sound, as if the bell is doing overtime and hasn't been compensated since the 14th century. You can relate. A small shop ahead glows faintly. You step inside, brushing past hanging bundles of herbs. The shopkeeper sits half asleep, carving something into a wooden plaque. It reads, "Cleanliness is next to godliness, but availability is next to cleanliness." You almost laugh, and then actually do. A soft, breathless sound. 3 jokes per section, the universe whispers. That's one. The shopkeeper waves lazily. Looking for scenting salts? Bath powders? Pea-free options are extra. You decline politely. Your night has had enough aromatics. As you leave the shop, the cat leads you deeper until the houses widen into a courtyard. There, a stone basin sits at the center, a communal washing place. You peer in. It's empty now except for smooth pebbles at the bottom, but earlier, this would have been bubbling with laundry and, no surprise, urine water. People swore it softened everything perfectly. Clothes, tensions, family grudges. A rooster crows again, prematurely and with defeat. You whisper back, "Go back to sleep." The rooster seems to consider it. You probably won't make it through this day, you think. And the thought is so soft it almost makes you smile. Not out of dread, but because your eyelids feel heavy with the peace that only very old streets and very peculiar traditions can offer. And as you follow the cat toward a lamplit archway, a sense of drowsy anticipation settles in. Another corner, another story, another task involving pee, probably. The Middle Ages had range. And you continue walking. The cat darts ahead through the archway, its shadow stretching long and spindly across the damp stones. You follow at a slower, heavier pace, the kind of pace that comes from walking through a city where every street teaches you something you didn't necessarily want to know but appreciate anyway. A mild drizzle begins, soft as breath on glass, and the air thickens with a mineral smell that clings to your senses like a wool cloak absorbing dew. Beyond the archway is a long, winding lane lined with workshops. Soft lamplight flickers behind thin shutters, each workshop holding its own tiny world of labor, chatter, and questionable smells. You pause at the first doorway when you hear a rhythmic scraping, metal on stone. You peek in. A man is sharpening blades, his motion slow, hypnotic. He's humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like an early version of a lullaby you'd hear today. A historical fact whispers through your mind. Medieval sharpeners sometimes dipped their whetstones in ammonia-rich liquids to clean or soften them. And yes, that ammonia often came from, well, you know by now. The sharpener glances at you. "This is quality work," he says proudly. "Better than that overpriced forge down the road. They don't season their stones properly." You nod, because what else does one do at 2 a.m. when confronted with a man bragging about ammonia-seasoned rocks? As you walk on, a barrel catches your eye. It's labeled with a symbol, 2 crossed sticks inside a circle, the medieval equivalent of caution. Content may surprise you. You lift the lid a little, just enough to see wool yarn submerged in a pale liquid, bobbing gently. It looks like noodles and broth if you ignore everything you've learned tonight. The workshop mistress steps forward, wiping her hands on her apron. "We're dyeing today," she explains. "First we soak the fibers, loosens everything, prepares them for color." Your brain nods politely while your stomach voices objections. She continues, "Some swear by fresh, some by stale. Me, I keep a blend. Tradition." That's your second subtle joke moment, because her tone is so serene, as though she's describing tea leaves instead of marinade for yarn. You mentally award her one historical charm point. You leave, your footsteps making a gentle sloshing sound in the newly formed puddles. Rain collects on your lashes, turning the lanterns into soft halos of gold. You notice again how the city leans and breathes. Medieval towns were never built for straight lines. Every curve feels like an exhale, every crooked alley like a soft apology. A warm glow appears ahead. A tavern, its sign swinging lazily. Inside, the murmur of voices rises and falls like waves. You step in for a moment. The tavern keeper offers a nod, setting down a clay mug. "Washing's done out back," she says absent-mindedly, then laughs. "Not your washing, I hope. Our brewers rinse their barrels in special solutions." House recipe. You know exactly what that means. Even beer wasn't safe from the great medieval fluid omnipresence. Patron waves his mug in your direction. You exploring the city? Avoid the tanners at dawn. They'll blind you. He gestures vaguely, his eyes half closed. Not with anger, with fumes. He pauses. Though they're also angry. Historians still debate whether angry tanners were simply overworked or just permanently infused with aggressive-smelling air. You step back outside to recover, letting the cool drizzle wash away the tavern's buffet of aromas. The rain has eased now, leaving everything slick and reflective. You catch your face in a puddle, soft, tired, a little amused that you've become a midnight tourist in the age of unconventional hygiene. The cat reappears. Of course it does. It flicks its tail, urging you toward a narrow staircase tucked between two workshops. You ascend, passing lines of drying cloth overhead. Drops fall on you, probably rainwater, hopefully only rainwater. The stairway widens at the top into an open terrace overlooking the dying yards. You hear the faint bubble of vats below, a slow simmering that feels almost meditative if you don't think too hard about the ingredients. Up here, the air is clearer, quieter, a space between the heartbeat of the city. You lean against the railing and breathe, letting the dampness settle into your hair. A woman sits at the far end of the terrace, spinning thread in slow circles. Her wheel hums like a sleepy insect. She smiles faintly. Night's the best time, she says. Less shouting, more thinking. Her hands move in long, practiced motions. Did you know some people used to wash wool in stale beer? Others used vinegar. Others. She pauses, then tilts her head knowingly. Well, you've smelled it around. You almost laugh again. Not because it's funny exactly, but because you've accepted your fate. This is your night now. A pilgrimage through an era where people solved every problem with something you'd rather flush. You watch the thread wrap around her spindle, smooth and rhythmic. There's a peacefulness to it, a reminder that even strange traditions happen in quiet, human moments. She mentions an obscure tidbit. Medieval households often kept piss pots, specifically for textile work, labeled so no one accidentally used the wrong one. A small, entirely unnecessary comfort in an age of questionable decisions. Far below, someone shouts about losing a sheep again. You hear a splash, then a curse. Another joke surfaces effortlessly. At least the sheep might come out cleaner. The rain starts again lightly, tapping your sleeves like a gentle reminder that night is moving forward, whether you are or not. You head back down the stairs as the cat inspects your ankles, clearly approving of your pace. As you walk, a lone musician plays a bowed instrument on the corner. His tune is slow, winding, full of melancholy and milk-warm calm. He nods at you and says, "Careful of the cobbles ahead. Slippery," then adds under his breath, "especially after the tanner's carts pass." You follow the curve of the road, passing the memory of earlier alleys, the barrels, the dye workshops, the soft-lit tavern. Everything is linked, stitched together like patches on a well-worn cloak. You feel yourself blending into the city's rhythm. Your eyes grow heavy. The world softens, and another corner awaits. The street ahead seems to glide beneath your feet, the stones darkened by the rain and polished by centuries of footsteps. Thousands of tired workers, merchants, apprentices, cats, and occasionally someone like you, wandering with no purpose except to stay awake just long enough to feel the night breathe. A thin mist begins curling around doorways and drifting through the alleys like it misplaced its schedule and decided to join the tour anyway. You follow the cat naturally, as it leads you into a wider square where the air changes again. It holds a sharper tang, unmistakable, a mixture of smoke and that ammoniac whisper you now recognize as readily as your own shadow. You're almost fond of it at this point. Almost. This square is quieter than the rest, not silent but steady. You hear a low scrape of wood, a soft thump, the shuffle of wool-heavy boots. A cooper, a barrel maker, sits near the center, hammering gently at a hoop, tapping it into place around a half-finished barrel. His movements are slow, methodical, the kind of rhythm that would make you drowsy even in a bright, energetic world. But here in the damp medieval night, with lanterns flickering and mist drifting like sleepy marsh spirits, the sound becomes a lullaby. He glances up at you with a tired smile. "You look like you've been through half the city," he says. "And trust me, the other half smells worse." A dry remark, a joke tucked neatly into his voice, like a wink that doesn't require eye movement. He sets aside the hoop and pulls a scrap of leather from his pocket. "You'd think barrels just hold ale," he continues. "But no, they get used for washing, steeping, storing, and if you're a tanner, even for, well, recipes best not spoken of. You know all too well what brews in the tanner's world." Still, you nod politely. The cooper leans forward conspiratorially. "Historical fact for you," he murmurs. "Did you know entire streets in some towns were legally assigned as urine collection roads? Folks hung signs outside like cheerful announcements. You imagine someone proudly hanging a sign reading, 'Welcome, please contribute responsibly,' and can't help the soft internal laugh that rises. He gets back to work, humming as if with each strike he knocks another minute of wakefulness out of your body. You step back into the misty square and notice a stall nearby where a woman is selling tiny clay pots. Each is marked with a symbol, the medieval equivalent of labels. You pick up one, a small pot with a sun-like sigil. The woman nods. "That one's for first morning collections. Best quality. Strongest." You nearly drop it. She continues calmly, as if she's discussing perfumes. "Great for cleaning, softening leather, whitening cloth. Some folks say it can even sharpen the mind." Then she shrugs. Historians still debate whether that last bit was metaphor or wishful thinking. You place the pot down very gently. The cat brushes against your leg and moves on. You follow it toward a covered walkway, where the shadows hang long and soft, like curtains swaying in a slow breeze. As you pass under it, you hear murmuring voices. Two monks in long wool robes speaking quietly. Their sandals scuff on the floor as they pause by a large wooden tub. One monk says, "Brother, I fear we mismeasured." The other sighs, "It's fine. The parchment will hold. Brother Simon used too much last week anyway." You peer in, not too close, and see sheets of parchment submerged in a pale mixture. Yes, the monks too used urine. For cleaning, for treating, for preparing. Even manuscripts were touched by this ancient ingredient, proving humanity's commitment to creative solutions has always been strong. One monk notices your presence and gives a tiny bow. "Fear not," he says. "Everything dries, everything purifies. The word remains." He smiles softly. The other adds, "And at least it's warm." That counts as joke number 2. You move along, feeling the walkway open to a long balcony overlooking the river. The water stretches out beneath you like a ribbon of ink, reflecting lanterns in sleepy ripples. You grip the railing and inhale deeply. The air here is cleaner, more forgiving. The faint smell of river plants and wet wood soothes you, a reminder that not every scent in medieval life carried a surprise ingredient. Below, several workers are lowering bundles into the river, washing away the last traces of treatment before the cloth continues along its journey. One shouts up, "Don't lean too far." The river takes who it wants on nights like this. Then he laughs, as though the river has a sense of humor. Joke 3 delivered by a man ankle-deep in questionable runoff. You watch them rinse the cloth, the colors fading and returning with the current. It's strangely calming. The slow rhythm, the sound of water, the way the mist clings to the river like it's reluctant to leave. You recall earlier streets, earlier voices, earlier barrels. The night folds over itself, creating layers that feel timeless and deeply human. The cat hops onto the railing beside you, stares at the water, then at you, then yawns. You feel that yawn in your bones. When it hops back down and trots away, you push off the railing and follow. Your steps feel softer now, your mind quieter. Another corner, another story, and still the night drifts on. The next alley is narrower than the others, narrow in the way that suggests it was built by someone who measured space using only shoulders and optimism. The walls almost touch, and you brush against rough plaster as you walk. A lantern hangs overhead, swaying gently, creaking like an old man settling into a chair. The flame shivers, sending warm gold across puddles that mirror the night sky. Ahead, you hear a rhythmic sloshing, a familiar sound by now. When you reach the end of the alley, you find yourself at the back of a small workshop. Another tanner's area, though this one seems quieter, more domestic. The yard holds several tubs, some covered with cloths, others open to the mist. A young apprentice, barely old enough to be trusted with a blunt knife, stirs one of the tubs with a long wooden pole. He moves with exaggerated care, like someone stirring soup they secretly fear. He notices you and gives a shy nod. Master says the mix ain't right tonight, he says. Smells different. Wind changed direction. You inhale lightly, just enough to detect the faint, sour tang of fermentation. He says I gotta stir it clockwise if we want good leather. He shrugs. I don't know if direction matters. Historians still debate whether it mattered at all. That earns a quiet smile from you, the subtle kind that fits the slow rhythm of the night. The apprentice continues stirring. People think tanning is all big vats and strong arms, he says. But it's mostly waiting, and stirring, and guessing. You sense the universal youthfulness in him, the desire to be competent mixed with the reality that competence takes years, especially when your materials include, well, anything available. You leave him to his work and wander toward the rear gate. A low fence separates the workshop from a small herb garden. The plants glisten with rain, their leaves heavy, the soil dark and fresh. Someone steps out from the side door, the tanner's wife, carrying a basket of dried herbs. She smiles warmly, the kind of smile that belongs to someone who has learned to live peacefully with strong smells and unpredictable weather. Herbs help, she says, sensing your curiosity. Lavender, marjoram, even rosemary. Keeps the house pleasant. She pauses. Well, more pleasant. She plucks a sprig of lavender and hands it to you. Hold this under your nose in our street. Works most days. You accept it gratefully. Joke number 1 delivered with floral grace. She turns back to her baskets and you continue. The cat reappears, of course it does, and wins between your ankles before darting ahead. You follow into a broader street where rainwater trickles along the edges like whispering streams. The buildings loom overhead, half-timbered and gently sagging, their roofs shining dark with the wet. You pass 3 laundresses huddled under an awning, beating cloth against smooth stones. One of them dips a cloth in a small bowl before scrubbing it vigorously. Yes, that unmistakable scent again. Brightens the whites, she says with cheerful pride. People think it's odd, but it works. And nobody's invented anything better yet. She shrugs. If they do, we'll switch. Maybe. You leave them laughing about some rumor involving a neighbor's goat and a misplaced laundry pot. Just beyond, a musician leans against a doorway, playing a slow tune on a small harp. His chords drift into the night, soft and warm. He nods as you pass. Careful where you step, he murmurs. Streets get slick with more than rain. Joke 2 floats by in the melody. You continue walking until the street opens to a large, semi-covered market square. The stalls are empty now, but the remnants of the day's activity remain. A few overturned barrels, damp straw, and chalk markings outlining where each vendor stood. The air here is calmer, less heavy. You sit on a worn wooden crate and let your breath settle. A stray dog trots up, sniffs your boots, and decides you are harmless. It circles twice before lying down beside you with a sigh that feels like ancient wisdom. The cat sits nearby, watching the dog with ambivalent tolerance. The two animals share the space with you in the quiet way creatures do at night, forming a temporary companionship born of stillness. In one corner of the square, a man sweeps debris into a pile. Bits of straw, a lost feather, charred wood from a cooking fire. He pauses to wipe his brow. People don't realize how much gets left behind after a market, he says without looking up. And the animals don't help. Except goats. They'll eat anything. He gestures vaguely at the debris. Sometimes they eat things they shouldn't. And then people complain. You suspect those complaints are very justified. Joke 3 settles like a small feather in the air. The rain has slowed again. The mist thickens, curling around your waist, softening the edges of everything. The stalls, the stones, your thoughts. You stand, the dog lifting its head sleepily before deciding you're not interesting enough to follow. The cat, ever loyal to your unconscious narrative arc, leads you down another path. You drift with it through a long passageway beneath an overhang of woven branches, where rainwater drips in quiet rhythm. The scent here is gentler. Wood, wet earth, faint smoke. As if the city finally decided to give your nose a break. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimes. Slow, heavy, dreamlike. And you walk on, softer now, drifting deeper into the night's quiet embrace. The bell's chime fades into the damp night as you follow the cat through a twisting corridor of uneven stone walls. The passage narrows, then widens abruptly into a small courtyard you haven't seen before. A hidden square tucked deep between leaning houses, the kind of place that feels like it materialized only when you step toward it. Lanterns hang from the beams overhead, their flames muted by fog, forming halos that hover like sleepy fireflies. In the center of the courtyard stands an old stone fountain, partly broken, partly stubbornly functional. A thin ribbon of water trickles from the carved spout, glistening under the lantern glow. Moss clusters thickly around its base, soft as old velvet. The cat hops onto the fountain rim, tail curling like punctuation, and looks at you expectantly, as if it's showing you a historical treasure. Beside the fountain sits an elderly man wrapped in layered wool, his hood pulled low. He holds a long-handled ladle, dipping it into the fountain as though checking its temperature. When he notices you, he gestures for you to sit. You do. The stone is cool beneath you, steadying. Funny thing about this fountain, he says. His voice is a soft rasp, like parchment turning pages by itself. Used to flush the workshop runoff from the block. Now it just sits here, cleaner than most wells. He chuckles, which may or may not be comforting. This square once collected everything: scraps, dyes, the liquids from nearby trades. All of it funneled through. He lifts the ladle to the lantern, inspecting the trickling water. Now it's just rain-fed, a peaceful old relic. You raise an eyebrow. Relic is a generous term for a fountain that once hosted medieval runoff, but the night has softened your judgment. He continues, historians still debate whether the city originally built this square for washing, storage, or just to hide things no one wanted to smell. He shrugs. Probably all three. You watch the water slip over the moss. Even the sound feels slow, as though the fountain is whispering half-forgotten stories. To your right, a doorway opens, warm lamplight spilling out. A woman steps through carrying a basket of small clay jars. She sets them on a bench and begins arranging them by size. She nods at you. For treating linen, she explains. People bring their cloth early in the morning. Keeps the stains out, keeps the fabric soft. Then she adds with a weary laugh, sometimes keeps the neighbors out too. Depends on the batch. Joke one lands gently, like a feather falling sideways. She hands one of the jars to the elderly man, and he sniffs it with appraisal bordering on defiance. Strong blend, he says. Storm must have been good to the collection buckets. You don't ask questions. You've learned. The woman settles onto a stool and begins rubbing her hands with lavender balm. Strange thing, she says. How people think our times were dirty. Truth is, we were always cleaning something. She gestures broadly at the courtyard, her jars, the fountain. Sometimes cleaning with things we'd rather not mention, but cleaning all the same. She looks at the moss. We made do. Everyone does. Something about the quiet of her voice sinks gently into you. The courtyard becomes a pocket of calm. Lanterns breathing, fountain murmuring, fog drifting with the confidence of a cat who's never once paid rent. The elderly man sets his ladle aside and begins carving into a small block of wood. The shavings fall like pale curls onto the stone. Used to carve tally sticks, he says, for business records. Strange how many numbers pass through my hands. He glances up. Stranger still what some people used to erase ink. He raises his eyebrows at you knowingly. Yes, even scribes used ammonia sometimes. Medieval life never missed an opportunity. You walk toward one corner of the courtyard, where a small shed leans precariously. Tools hang from hooks, their shadows long and tired. A bucket sits near the wall, covered, thank goodness, marked with a symbol you now recognize without any explanation. Dedicated gathering, dedicated use, the medieval version of asset management. The cat jumps down from the fountain and weaves through your legs. You take that as your cue to move on. When you reach the archway leading out, the woman calls after you. Careful on Tanner's Row. Slippery when damp. The elderly man adds. Slippery when dry too. Joke too. Delivered with the resignation of shared community suffering. You step under the archway and into a long descending street. The walls broaden, the space opens, and a pale light washes through. The night is aging, softening at the edges like parchment soaked gently in water. The cobblestones glisten, lined with little rivulets that lead downhill toward the river. At the far end of the street, a large workshop comes into view, warm with firelight. The smell reaches you first, sharp, pungent, unmistakable. Tanners at work. Again, medieval cities were built on layers of necessity, and this craft was one of the loudest, smelliest, most essential layers of all. A group of workers stand around a large hide draped over a frame. One of them wipes his brow and notices you approaching. Long night, he asks. You nod. He laughs. It's longer here. He gestures to a barrel behind them. Steeped that batch yesterday. Needs another few hours before scraping. He taps the side. Don't get too close unless you want to clear your sinuses and your regrets. Joke 3 arrives with the enthusiasm of a man who has both. You move past the workshop, letting the cool mist dilute the stronger sense into something survivable. The cat trots beside you, tail swaying like a metronome guiding your steps. The road begins to slope upward, winding between tall homes with shuttered windows. The wind whispers through them, carrying distant voices, distant laughter, distant arguments about whose turn it was to fetch water. The world here is quieter, but never fully still, and you walk deeper into the drifting night. The slope leads you to a high walkway overlooking the lower streets, a long wooden bridgeway that runs along the inner wall of the town. The wood feels slightly damp under your feet, creaking softly, the sound echoing through the sleeping quarters on either side. Lanterns hang from beams overhead, their flames steady but small, like little hearts beating calmly through the dark. From up here, you can see the rooftops bow slightly under the weight of the fog. Chimneys exhale lazy ribbons of smoke, each carrying layers of stories. Baked bread, boiled herbs, late-night broths, sour treatments steeping for dawn. Even the smells look tired from working overtime. 2 guards stand near the far end of the walkway, leaning on pikes with the posture of men surviving the final hours of a long shift. They nod as you approach. "Quiet night," one says, rubbing his eyes. "Smells better than usual." The second guard snorts. "Only because the wind's merciful tonight." He gestures toward the lower town. "When it blows the other way, let's just say we choose the upper posts for a reason." Joke 1 drifts out like a sigh. You continue along the walkway. Below, you see a long trough of water running parallel to the wall, likely one of the designated rinsing channels. Workers earlier must have dumped buckets into it. Now it lies calm, holding reflections of lanterns overhead. A thin layer of foam clings to one edge. You decide kindly not to speculate. Ahead, a stairway leads back down. You descend slowly, each step steady and rhythmic, guiding you deeper into the quieter part of the city. When you reach the bottom, you find a narrow lane lined with wooden racks. Bundles of cloth hang from them, drying, airing, bleaching under the pale moonlight. A woman tends the racks with slow movements, checking the cloth by touch. She holds a lantern close, examining the fibers. "Most people don't know this," she says without looking up. "But cloth whitening can take days and nights." She presses her fingers into a piece of linen. "You can't rush it. You use your solutions, your soaking, your rinsing, your treatments." She smiles faintly. "And still the moon does half the work." Historical fact. Medieval cloth bleaching often relied on sunlight, and moonlight was believed to help too. You watch her fold a long linen sheet. "My mother used to say the moon has patience for things we don't." She lifts the lantern. Historians still debate whether that was poetic or just something she said to keep me from complaining. Joke 2 delivered through maternal wisdom. You continue on. The racks stretch for several houses, a quiet forest of swaying cloth. The night breeze threads through them, turning each piece into a ghostly banner. The scent here is gentler water, air, and the faintest trace of the treatments they've left behind. At the end of the lane, a man kneels beside a wooden bucket, scrubbing his boots with a determined expression. When he notices you, he sighs dramatically. "Boot cleaning," he mutters. "The real enemy of civilization." He dunks the brush again. "Do you know how many things stick to boots in this city?" He shakes his head. "You don't want to know." "I barely want to know." He points to the bucket. "This mixture here smells terrible, works incredibly." He pauses. Is it what you think it is? Probably. Joke 3, polite but inevitable. You walk past him as he scrubs with heroic resignation. The cat appears again, guiding you toward a large wooden door at the bottom of a short hill. The door stands half open, warm light spilling out. You enter and find yourself in a communal workshop filled with quiet activity. Several workers sit around low tables, mending cloth, cutting leather, polishing small tools. The atmosphere is peaceful, not lively, not weary, just calm. The kind of calm that comes from routine and shared purpose. A woman at the nearest table smiles at you, gesturing to an empty seat. Sit if you need to, she says. Night's longest just before it ends. Her hands move steadily as she stitches a tunic. This city smells strange to outsiders, she says gently. But to us, it's home. She ties off the thread. Every scent tells you something. Who's working? Who's boiling? Who's rinsing? Who's done for the night? You realize she's right. By now, the city's patchwork of aromas has become a map in your mind. Strange, yes, but familiar in its own sleepy way. You step back outside. The air feels colder now, lighter, as if the night is thinning. Fog drifts low, like the city has exhaled after holding a story too long. The cat circles your ankles, then walks ahead slowly, inviting you to follow. And you do. You walk slowly toward the old workshop at the bend of the stream, its shape revealed in fragments by the thin spill of lamplight trembling through the warped shutters. The door hangs slightly crooked, as though it has spent one too many winters arguing with gravity, and gravity has clearly been winning. The wood smells faintly of smoke, herbs, and something else, something sharp, almost metallic, that you can't quite place but which definitely has medieval industry written all over it. You pause at the threshold, listening. Inside, something scrapes, slowly, rhythmically, not threatening, more like someone shaping or sharpening a tool. You push the door gently with your fingertips. It creaks with a long, theatrical sigh as if it has waited a century for someone to open it dramatically. You step into the dim room. It's warm inside, but dim enough that your eyes take a moment to adjust. The glow comes from a tiny clay oil lamp perched on a cluttered table. Its flame wiggles like a sleepy dancer as a draft slinks through the door behind you. Shelves line the walls, each crowded with tools both familiar and vaguely alarming. Hooks, beams, tongs, pots, jars. A medieval miscellaneous drawer, but expanded to full room size. A man stands at a low bench, working on a strip of leather stretched between two pegs. He glances over his shoulder at you, his expression neither surprised nor bothered, just curious, in the calm way of someone accustomed to late evening wanderers seeking warmth or stories. Closing up soon, he says, though he clearly isn't closing anything yet. But you're welcome to have a look while I finish this piece. You nod and step farther inside. The air holds a mix of leather, oil, and that unmistakable faint tang of ammonia. You know instantly, yes, of course, this workshop too has dipped into the extensive medieval urine economy. You almost admire the consistency. He notices your nose wrinkle a little and chuckles. Oh, it's not so bad today. Fresh air earlier helped clear it out. You glance at an assortment of tools laid neatly on the bench. Knives of various shapes, wooden paddles polished by years of handling, and a small jar of liquid with a stopper that looks far too new compared to everything else surrounding it. He gestures toward the leather he's softening. Before you ask, yes, this was treated with the usual mixture. Pea salt, a bit of lime. Works wonders for loosening the fibers. You nod politely, as if you were absolutely on the verge of asking exactly that. People underestimate how important this stuff is. He continues, tapping the leather gently. Without it, half the shoes in town would fall apart within months. And don't get me started on belts. A bad belt can ruin a whole day. You suppress a smile. The idea that medieval people worried about unreliable belts the same way modern people worry about cheap phone chargers is unexpectedly comforting. As he works, he tells you about his trade. How urine-based solutions help strip hair from hides, how they soften stubborn patches that would otherwise crack, and how the finishing oil masks the scent. Mostly, he adds, with a sideways grin. He also mentions, with that offhand tone medieval people use when discussing economic reality, that some cities had official piss collectors who went door to door at night gathering full chamber pots to sell to workshops like his. A respectable job, he says. Well, respectable enough. Someone had to do it. He shrugs. Historians still debate whether every town had collectors, or whether it was mostly urban centers. I say they did. People love convenience. He wipes his hands on a cloth, then gestures for you to examine a finished piece hanging nearby. A beautifully worked belt, smooth and supple. It looks far nicer than the process that created it. You run your fingers along the leather. It's warm from earlier handling, and you can almost feel the history embedded in its surface. Every step, every dunk, every stir in the tanning vats. A draft of night air snakes into the room, tugging lightly at your hair and pulling at the lamplight. You realize how late it's gotten. The craftsman notices too and gives a small nod. One worker to another recognizing the day's long end. Best be heading out, he says gently. Night falls quick. You thank him, step back into the cool darkness, and pull the door closed behind you. The stream murmurs somewhere ahead, guiding you as always. You follow its soft sound down the narrow path, deeper into the quiet. The moon rises above the rooftops, pale and steady, watching over your final stretch of wandering. The world grows softer around the edges. Houses outlined by faint starlight, distant chimneys exhaling their last sighs of the day. You walk on, and the story follows. Night deepens into something fuller now, a velvet darkness layered with centuries of quiet. You follow the stream farther from the center of town, where the houses thin into scattered cottages and the path begins to dissolve into soft earth. The world narrows to what you can hear. Water whispering over pebbles, distant insects threading the air with their thin chorus, a breeze brushing through tall grass like fingers smoothing out a crumpled page. You feel the day settling behind you. Its smells, its sounds, its odd comforts. The leather shop, the villagers by the water, the wool carder, the fulling tubs. So many crafts, all woven together by necessity and, remarkably, by the humblest liquid the human body could offer. There is something strangely touching about the way people here made use of everything. How nothing was waste. How every household chamber pot, treated with the respect of a practical mind, contributed to cloth, dye, leather, cleaning, or coin. A world where survival depended not on what you owned, but on what you did with what life handed you. Even the unpleasant parts. You step onto a small rise overlooking the whole town. Lanterns glow faintly in windows, each one steady like the heartbeat of a household winding down. Smoke drifts from a chimney. Somewhere, a dog barks once before deciding sleep is a better use of time. You wrap your arms around yourself, not for warmth but for the quiet pleasure of holding onto a moment that feels complete. The town, with all its oddities and earthy practicality, has opened itself to you gently, without flourish. Just the simple honesty of how things were done. And in its own strange way, that honesty feels like a blanket. Below you, the stream shines faintly under the moon. A silver ribbon. A listener to centuries. the keeper of every secret rinsed from wool, every splash from a rinsed bucket, every whispered conversation along its banks. You sit in the grass, letting your breath fall into the same slow rhythm as the water, letting the quiet seep in, letting the world soften around you. And now, the story begins to fade, slowly, gently, like a candle allowed to burn itself down. You take one more breath, long and steady, feeling the coolness settle into your lungs before drifting out in a warm exhale. The night around you stretches wider, smoothing out into something softer, like the world itself is loosening the knots in its shoulders. Every sound becomes rounder, quieter. The whisper of the stream, the hush of the grass, the distant sigh of wind curling around the rooftops. Your eyes trace the gentle curve of the moon, its pale light brushing your skin with the tenderness of an old friend who's been waiting for you to slow down. The sky above is deep and calm, scattered with stars that glow like warm embers instead of distant fires. Nothing presses in. Nothing pulls at you. The world feels unhurried, unbothered, fully content to let you rest. You let your thoughts drift the way leaves float on water, effortless, unsteered, carried by a current that knows exactly where it's going. Every place you walk today begins to soften in your memory. The tannery with its steady rhythm, the wool workshop, the villagers sharing cider by the stream. Even the sharp smells of the Middle Ages fade into something more muted, more dreamlike, until they feel less like sensations and more like stories settling into a distant corner of your mind. You let your breathing match the slow loop of water gliding over stone. Nothing rushed, nothing urgent, just the steady, patient movement of a world at rest. You feel your body grow heavier in the best way, an anchor sinking into comfort. The night wraps around you like a cloak lined with quiet. The last of the story drifts away, soft as a final exhale, and you let yourself drift with it, slowly, easily, peacefully.